Have you ever wondered what it's like to realize that the person living in your walls has been dead for 30 years? I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me 5 years ago, something that still makes me check every corner of my apartment before I go to sleep. This is the story of how my wife and I discovered we weren't alone in our new home, and how we learned that some tenants never leave. It was late September 2019 when my wife Clara and I moved into our first house together in Cedar Falls, a small town in upstate New York. We were both 28, newlyweds, and this place was everything we could afford on our combined teacher salaries. A 2-story Victorian with original hardwood floors, crown molding, and that specific kind of charm you only find in homes built in the 1920s. The realtor, an older woman named Mrs. Hendricks, had been almost too eager to close the deal. She dropped the price twice, without us even asking. At the time, I thought we were just good negotiators. Clara joked that we probably bought a money pit, but we were too excited to care. The first week was normal. We unpainted boxes, arranged furniture, argued about where the couch should go, typical newlywed stuff. Our golden retriever, Bailey, had the run of the place, and she seemed happy enough, though she refused to go into the basement. We figured she'd warm up to it eventually. The sounds started on our 9th night in the house. I woke up around 2 a.m. to what I can only describe as scratching, like fingernails dragging slowly across drywall. It was coming from inside the bedroom wall, the one we shared with the hallway. Clara was still asleep beside me, and Bailey was at the foot of the bed, her ears pinned back, staring at that wall. I convinced myself it was mice. Old houses get mice, right? I made a mental note to call an exterminator in the morning and eventually fell back asleep. But the scratching came back the next night, and the night after that. Always around 2 a.m., always the same wall. The sound would last for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, then stop abruptly like someone had given up on whatever they were trying to do. By the end of the second week, Clara had heard it too. We called an exterminator, a guy named Dave, who'd been in business for 30 years. He spent 3 hours checking every wall cavity, every crawl space, every potential entry point. He found nothing. No droppings, no nests, no evidence of any animals at all. Honestly, folks, he said as he packed up his equipment, I don't know what to tell you, your walls are clean. That night the scratching was louder than ever, and this time we heard something else. A low, rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking from the inside, trying to get our attention. I decided to investigate the walls myself. The next day, while Clara was at work, I went into the hallway with a flashlight and examined every inch of the wall where the sounds were coming from. That's when I noticed something strange about the wallpaper. There was a seam that didn't quite match up, a section that looked like it had been replaced more recently than the rest. I peeled back the wallpaper carefully. Underneath was drywall that was definitely newer than the original plaster. Someone had patched this section, maybe in the last 20 or 30 years. My heart started pounding. I went down to the basement and grabbed my toolbox. It took me about an hour to carefully remove a section of the drywall. The smell hit me first. Musty, stale air that hadn't been circulated in decades. I shined my flashlight into the gap I'd created, and that's when I saw it. There was a space between the walls. Not a normal wall cavity, but an actual narrow room, maybe 2 feet wide and 6 feet long. And inside that space, I could see things: a folding chair, a small camping lantern, empty food containers, blankets. Someone had been living in our walls. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called Clara. Then I called the police. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. They helped me remove more of the drywall, enough for someone to squeeze through. One of the officers, a younger guy named Martinez, volunteered to climb in with a flashlight. What he found made both officers go silent. There were things scratched into the walls of that hidden space. Words, dates, drawings, and there were dozens of Polaroid photographs, all of them showing the interior of our house. Rooms we recognized, but with different furniture, different people. The photos were dated from the early 1990s. But the worst part was what Officer Martinez found at the back of the space. Personal items that didn't belong to us. A woman's watch, reading glasses, a small journal with entries dated 1993. The police took everything as evidence. They told us to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for a few nights. We went to Clara's parents' house, and for 3 days we waited while the police investigated. Bailey stayed close to Clara the entire time and wouldn't let either of us out of her sight. Finally, we got a call from Detective Sarah Chen, who'd taken over the case. What she told us made my blood run cold. In 1993, the house had been owned by a woman named Margaret Holloway, age 72. She'd lived there alone after her husband died. In November of that year, she'd reported hearing sounds in her walls and called the police multiple times, but nothing was ever found. In December, Margaret Holloway disappeared. Her body was eventually found 3 months later in a ravine about 10 miles from the house. The death was ruled accidental. They said she'd gotten disoriented and fallen. But Detective Chen had pulled the old case files. Margaret had made detailed notes about the sounds she heard, times, locations, patterns. All of it matched exactly what Clara and I had experienced. Then Chen told us the part that still haunts me. They'd found a wallet in that wall space, hidden behind the insulation. It belonged to a man named Thomas Welker. According to records, Welker had been a drifter with a history of breaking into homes and living in crawl spaces and attics without the owners knowing. In 1994, just 2 months after Margaret Holloway's body was found, Thomas Welker died in a house fire in Vermont. He was 56 years old. We moved back into the house after the police finished their investigation. We had the entire wall space sealed up properly, and we even had the house blessed by a local priest, though neither of us is particularly religious. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing I haven't even told Clara, because I don't want to scare her more than she already is. 3 weeks after we moved back in, I was going through some old boxes we'd stored in the attic, things from the previous owners that they'd left behind. At the bottom of one box, I found more Polaroids. These ones weren't from the 1990s. They were dated from 2018 and 2019, right before we bought the house. They showed the interior of our house again, but what made my stomach drop was that some of these photos showed the previous owners sleeping in their bed. The angle suggested the photos were taken from the doorway of the bedroom. Someone had been in the house, taking pictures of people while they slept. The detective said Thomas Welker died in 1994. So who took those photos in 2018? I never found an answer to that question, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. We still live in that house. We couldn't afford to move, and despite everything, we've made it our home. The scratching stopped after we sealed the walls, and we haven't heard anything unusual in over 4 years. But sometimes late at night, when I'm lying in bed next to Clara with Bailey curled up at our feet, I think about those photographs from 2018. I think about the fact that someone or something was in that house just before we moved in. And I wonder if Thomas Welker died in 1994. Who was living in the walls? Some questions don't have answers. And maybe that's what makes them so terrifying.